myself up now.
Perfect. Cool. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And I'll start us off with the astronomy news. I'll just share my screen. So yeah, what's been happening above us in the astronomy news recently? So yeah, first news item, NASA launches DART mission to test planetary defense. Now, before we start getting worried, this is just a test. The planet itself isn't in peril yet, but this is just a test to see how NASA might be able to help defend our planet if there were an asteroid which is headed towards Earth. So this is called the Double Asteroid Redirection Test, and it will intentionally crash into an asteroid moonlet called Dimorphos. So these are the two asteroids of interest here. So the one is Didymos, which is around 780 meters across. And there's a smaller one called Dimorphos, 160 meters across. In this diagram, it's Didymos A and B, but this one is also called Dimorphos. And the whole aim of this is that NASA's launched this spacecraft. It just launched, I think this week or last week, and it will reach these asteroids next year in September 2022. And at that point, the asteroid will be 11.2 million kilometers away from Earth. And the whole point of this test is that NASA wants to try kind of ramming this asteroid with the aim of seeing if it can shorten orbit by several minutes. So this asteroid here is currently orbiting around the bigger one, and NASA wants to basically bump it and then see, does it actually change the orbit? And they're hoping to give it a new orbit. The whole point of this is that if this works, it means that in future, if there were an asteroid, headed to planet Earth and we thought it might be dangerous, then this is something that we might be able to do, kind of ram an asteroid and actually kind of push it off course or push it enough out of orbit that, it might save us. So this will be occurring next year, September 2022, and there is a follow-up mission, I believe, by the European Space Agency a couple of years later. They will also go to the same asteroid just to take some more measurements and actually see how far off course have we pushed it and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, something to look out for next year. So also in the news, spacewalks riskier than ever after Russia's recent anti-satellite test. So in the news a couple of weeks ago, you might recall that we discussed a recent anti-satellite test that Russia performed. They blew up one of their old satellites, but they did this without really warning anyone, without giving anyone a heads up. And they did this in one of the most heavily populated parts of space, where we have a lot of things like the International Space Station and other satellites in orbit. So yeah, it's been a couple of weeks now. NASA is still postponing several planned ISS spacewalks. So that they had a whole bunch of things that were due to happen or are due to happen soon, which are being put on hold because it's a bit more dangerous right now to do these spacewalks with this extra stuff flying around. The European Space Agency Space Debris Office says that satellites right now in orbit probably have to perform about twice as many avoidance maneuvers as they would normally. So when a satellite is in orbit, sometimes if we can tell that it's on a collision course with some debris, that satellite might be able to, kind of fire its thrusters or something to kind of move out of the way. So that's just a normal part of what satellites have to do. But now with all the extra debris, it's estimated that those satellites are having to do it twice as much. And now in the US, a space law advisor says that he believes that this act by Russia violated the UN Outer Space Treaty. And he reckons that NASA, SpaceX, and others could actually sue Russia. So just to be clear, we haven't heard that this is actually going to happen. NASA and SpaceX haven't said that. But this law advisor says that in his opinion, this has kind of opened the door for that to happen. So it will be interesting to see what happens with this. So another news item, astronomers discover an exoplanet with a year that lasts 16 hours, and it's getting shorter. So this is all about a planet which has been named TOI 2109b. And the TOI stands for TESS Object of Interest. And TESS is it's a kind of telescope which tries to find exoplanets by using the transit method. So this is something which we've spoken about in our meetings before. The whole idea of the transit method is that you look out into space, you see a star, and you watch that star over time and kind of measure its brightness. And over time, if the brightness dims and then comes back up in a regular fashion, then we can tell, oh, that must mean there's a planet that's kind of orbiting around that star. And so using TESS, we discovered this planet, and we're very confused because using the transit method, we thought, oh yeah, there's something in front of this star, but it's going past every 16 hours. And yeah, it turns out this has got a very short orbital period. So this planet in question is 5 times as massive as Jupiter, and it orbits a star that is twice as massive as our sun, and it's very close to the star. So this planet is actually 24 times closer to the star than Mercury is to our sun, just to give you an idea of how close that is. Which means that this is actually the second hottest exoplanet that we've ever discovered. Also, this planet is tidally locked, which means that the same face of the planet faces the sun the whole time. So obviously, the half of the planet that's facing the sun is super, super hot. And scientists are kind of wondering about the other half of the planet. Would that be really cold because it's away from the sun? Or is this planet so close to the sun that even the far side would be hot as well? So we're not quite sure at this stage. Lots of questions there. And yeah, this exoplanet has the shortest orbit ever discovered and the fastest orbital decay. So every year, the orbit decays by 10 to 750 milliseconds. So over time, scientists think that in around 10 million years, this planet may not be there anymore because it'll get so close to the star, it was kind of falling, basically. So yeah, it just goes to show, even with all of the exoplanets that we've discovered out there and all of the stars, we're still finding things that surprise us and interest us in terms of exoplanets. So also in the news, Mars lander maps the underground by listening to the wind. So this is about NASA's InSight probe, which landed on Mars in 2018 to study the planet's interior. So this particular lander, this is just a probe. It's not a rover like Perseverance, so it can't move around. So basically it landed down here on a flat part of Mars about 3 years ago, and it's been in the same spot ever since. And its whole purpose is to find out more about kind of geoscience. So it has a number of instruments on board, things like trying to measure the temperature of the planet, kind of drill down into the planet to find out more about what's going on. And now a new study has used the instruments on the lander to look at the ambient vibrations from the wind reverberating through layers of soil and rock. So this is based on a technique which was developed here on Earth. Now, basically, when we think about the ground on Earth, even though it oftentimes seems still, it's always constantly moving from just very minor influences from the wind, from the ocean, from tremors, from earthquakes far away. And so the idea is that we're now looking at the same kind of thing on Mars. By kind of using very sensitive readings, we're able to look at these kind of minute disturbances and kind of see the actual surface of Mars kind of moving a bit, and then even taking it a step further. And from those measurements, we're able to tell what's happening underneath the surface. So this new study has allowed us to look into the subsurface to a depth of about 200 meters. And the closer to the surface, we're pretty confident about what we see in terms of the different layers. The further down, there's a bit more margin of error, so we're not quite sure. But still, it's really fascinating that we can tell so much now about what's underneath Mars just from this. And in future, scientists hope to tweak this technique and improve it even further so that maybe we'll be able to study depths down to like maybe the first few kilometers of Mars's crust. And finally in the news, one lucky woman wins a free trip to space. So this is Keisha Shahaf. She's a health coach from Antigua and Barbuda, and she's won 2 seats on the space plane. So this is the Virgin Galactic space plane. So Virgin Galactic, if you recall, they had their first space plane mission back in, I think it was June or July of this year, when Richard Branson and a few others were on board, and the space plane kind of went up into the, not like really far into space, kind of like the lower limit of what we would consider space. They kind of go up there, get some zero gravity for about 10 minutes or so, and then come back down. And since then, they're now selling seats. So anyone who has enough money can go on the space plane. They're selling these seats for $450,000 US each. And so this lucky woman has won 2 seats for 900,000, which in New Zealand dollars, I worked it out, it's 1.3 million New Zealand dollars. These 2 seats are worth. And yes, this was all part of a fundraising effort by Virgin Galactic and a fundraising platform called Omaze. And the whole thing is that they wanted to raise money for a non-for-profit called Space for Humanity. They have a program called the Citizen Astronaut Program, or CAP. And that's all about basically making space more accessible. So this fundraiser is no longer running, unfortunately. So if you want to get a free ticket to this one, you've missed your chance. But it's exciting to know that this kind of thing is happening now. You know, maybe there'll be more of these things in future. And hey, maybe one day you'll win a free trip to space as well. And that's all for the news tonight. So I'll pass back over to James for now. Thanks, everyone.
And welcome to those other people who have recently joined us for tonight's talk. I want to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Peter Detterline. You may have heard his name before because Heratina mentioned it in her talk a couple of weeks ago. In true Heratina form, she managed to twist his arm to come and speak to us. This really is an honor because Peter's been involved with astronomy for many, many, many years. He was a director of Boyertown Planetarium for over 35 years. And in that time, probably spoke to 1 million people, 500,000 people or so. He's received numerous awards for astronomy. As you heard from Heratina, he was the observatory director for the Mars Society, where he heads up the astronomy team, providing solar and robotic telescope for members of the Mars Desert Research Station. He provides training for robotic telescopes in New Mexico. And on top of everything else, he's written a number of, written a number of astronomical papers for various publications. He was selected to be part of the Astronomy in Chile, Ecuador Ambassador Program. He's built his own observatory. He's completed over 35 observing programs and is known in the Astronomical League as a master observer. So when he's not busy doing all of that, he is also a commission minister for United Church of Christ. So very busy man, and we are very honored to have you here. Just on a sideline, it's about 1:30 in the morning where Peter is. Thankfully, no clouds, so he was able to make it to us today. But I will hand it over to you, Peter. Welcome, and thank you very, very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here, really. Let me just share a screen. And tonight we're going to be talking about northern celestial treasures. I want to talk about the really cool things that we can see up in the northern hemisphere. And Let me ask a few questions before we get started. So if you can find that chat button and just give me some ideas here, I think we'll be in pretty good shape.
So you can either just unmute yourself to answer and then mute yourself afterwards, or you
just have 2 questions, and then we're going to have lots of time for questions at the end.
Yeah.
And
you could, yeah, sorry, if you don't want to put on your microphone and to answer, just write it in the chat and we'll definitely relay that on. Go ahead, Peter, sorry.
Not a problem at all. I'm just kind of curious how many of you have already been in the Northern Hemisphere and done some observing?
Yes. Some people a bit,
Got everything
some
from not me to a bit.
No.
Okay.
So mostly no, 1 or 2 of us yes, and 1 or 2 of us
would say
partly.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And Joe just thinks it's funny. You know, Judy said yes.
True. The yeses are really starting to come in now. The yeps and yeses.
Well, I won't ask Karatina because I know the answer to that.
I think Karatina is a yes, definitely. Okay, that's great. So quite a few of you have. All right, just one other question then. And for the people who have been to the Northern Hemisphere, before you arrived, what was it that you really wanted to see most? What did you really want to see in the Northern Hemisphere more than anything else? You had something in mind.
Well, for me personally, I'd always heard of the North Star, so I always wanted to see the North Star. And I'd always heard of the Big Dipper and wanted to see the Big Dipper. And those are pretty much the 2 things that I really wanted to see.
Okay.
So it had Aurora, Northern Lights.
Northern Lights, North Star. Yeah, Harry, that's taken from my backyard. I took that picture from, I was just really happy no airplanes went by during that time. Okay, so what I want to do is talk about your future trip to the Northern Hemisphere for some of you who've never been there, what you can expect, what are some really cool things to see, how you want to attack this, and what you can do, because it's really exciting to explore a totally alien sky where all the constellations are catawampus upside down and backwards, and you get to see things you've never seen before. It is really an exciting time to pull that off. My first trip to the Southern Hemisphere was June of 2001. And I got the chance to go to Zimbabwe and Zambia, Africa, to see the total eclipse of the sun. So this was fantastic, and I was all set for this. It's 2001. I don't have small refractors at this point. They weren't the big thing to have. There are no ZWO cameras. I don't think I had a DSLR at that time. I don't think so. I was using an 8mm video camera, which actually worked out rather well and gave me a nice video of the entire event. But here we are. And this is on eclipse day. We're taking our group photo, and I'm the guy pointing to the sun in case nobody's sure where to look for this thing, but I don't think that was really an issue. And it was really exciting. But here's the thing, I can only take so much luggage to Africa. And I really have absolutely zero interest in taking optical equipment on a plane with the checked luggage. It's got to be with me that I can physically carry it and hold it. Okay, we'll put that in the checked luggage. The optical stuff I got to have with me. And that gets difficult. So I had to make a few decisions. I only had 2 nights. That was it. 2 nights in Zimbabwe where I would be able to see the sky. Other than that, we're going to be in cities. We're going to be elsewhere. I get 2 beautiful, clear nights. And boy, were they. The sky was amazing. Zimbabwe is close enough to the equator that twilight doesn't last very long. It goes from day to night very, very quickly. And the sky was pitch black. And it was just absolutely gorgeous. And I needed to make the most I could of those 2 all-nighters. So I had the approach to this was, yes, just like you were saying, I want to see some constellations. I definitely want to see some constellations. That is a big part of it. I want to start to learn some of the Southern Hemisphere stuff. But more importantly, we're looking at this for visual. I want to see the Milky Way above my head. The center of the Milky Way in the ceiling, right there at the zenith, would just be amazing. It's always so low to us. Sagittarius is always hugging the horizon. And to have it up close to the zenith would just be incredible. I want to see the Magellanic Clouds. I want to see Omega Centauri and Alpha Centauri and 47 Tucani and the Tarantula. Oh my gosh, this is getting great. I'm excited. So constellations is a big part. But I also want to get in deeper because it's my first real trip down here, but I don't have the luggage to take equipment. And so I ended up taking binoculars. To me, that would be the best use of my time. And I had about 100 different objects, deep sky objects to look at that would be good for binoculars in the Southern Hemisphere. It'll give me a really nice overview. Binoculars are always a great staple for this type of thing. And if you haven't done binocular astronomy, it is phenomenal. You get to use both eyes, they're portable. You can do variable star research with them. You can look at just things very, very quickly. It's nice. It is really a nice way to go. And it doesn't take up a whole lot of weight. The next trip I had was down in Chile. And in that one, of course, I was visiting observatories. I had 2 nights again, just only 2 nights, all-nighters, but that was at Cerro Tololo. And they seem to have plenty of telescopes there. And we could borrow some of the ones that just were kind of laying around. So that was phenomenal, being able to look at the sky differently that way. But mostly I had the DSLR camera and lenses at that point to image. And then my 3rd trip to the Southern Hemisphere was 2019. I went to Australia and got a chance to see beautiful New Zealand. Spent a little time with Harry and even participate in one of their star parties over there, which was a lot of fun, having some northern guy running a telescope in a southern star party, which was really kind of cool. But for that trip, now we've got the equipment and all the gear so that we can really do it upright. So I had my 51mm Williams Optic Red Cat that I can take on the plane with me. The mount can go into the checked luggage, but that I can still fit in my camera bag. And now I can start to take images of the sky like Eta Carini that you see here that I was able to take. 4 nights. I had 4 nights to explore the southern sky with a great scope, camera system, You can't believe the laundry list of things I had to take images of. I ended up with 2. Out of my 4 nights, 3 of the nights were overcast. And I don't know if it was smoke. I don't know. It just happened. And the first night was a good night. It was a good night. It wasn't a great night. It was a decent night. And I got to do a lot of visual stuff and going through constellations and doing some sketching. I enjoy sketching as well. But that was my night to do the photography, and really didn't get a whole lot in just because of the nature of the night. So looking forward to heading back down for a longer period of time to take advantage of this. So if you're going into the Northern Hemisphere, we need to take a look at visual, binocular, and telescope. Those are the 3. So let's get started. Visual. Yeah, you want to see the Big Dipper. And you can see the belly of the bear. I guess from where you're at, you can scratch his tummy. It just comes up over the horizon and his legs are kind of kicked up. But here you're going to see it at the zenith. And it really is just a beautiful, beautiful constellation, as famous as your Southern Cross. You may have the Southern Cross in your flag. In Alaska, that's the Alaska state flag. They've got the Big Dipper and Polaris being way too bright, okay? It's about the same brightness as the other stars of the Big Dipper, but that's not helping anything as far as astronomy goes, but it is a cool flag. And of course, the Big Dipper is part of the much larger pattern, the Great Bear, or what we call Ursa Major. And if we take the last 2 stars in the bowl of the Dipper, W and Merak, and go about a dipper's length across the sky, it points to Polaris, the North Star. The last star in the handle of the Little Dipper, or Ursa Minor. A lot of you said Polaris is one of the first things you'd want to see. And you know what? When I was putting this together, I'm thinking, if I lived in the Southern Hemisphere, I came to the North, Polaris would be really, really super high on my list. Just to see a bright star at the celestial pole would be really cool and incredibly convenient. I mean, both of those things would be just amazing. But it's not just Polaris you want to take a look at. You also want to look at that second star in the handle of the Big Dipper, Mizar Alcor. That one is also a classic and really important. So visually, you want to take a look at those 2 stars as well as the constellations there. And with binoculars, Ferrero 6 is a beautiful asterism. And in the Little Dipper, the mini coat hanger. So let's take a look at these first before we get into the telescope stuff in this area. Polaris. It is not exactly at the North Celestial Pole. It's about a half degree. That's half a pinky width held at arm's length away from the real celestial pole, but there it is. And it is close enough for us to align telescopes and to have a lot of fun. Just say, oh, that's north in a heartbeat, and just know exactly where that's going to be. So that is really very, very nice, and certainly unusual. Something different that you would see from your perspective and something you'd want to enjoy. So you definitely want to take a look at Polaris. And the Big Dipper again, you want to take a look at Mizar and Alcor. Very, very famous. Native American Indians, there's always the legend that they would ask their youth how many stars they see in the Big Dipper. They'd count them up and give the 7. Okay, that's great, you got it. And then there was always that keen-eyed observer who would say 8. And it was the exceptional brave who could see those 2 stars and showed that he paid attention to detail and also had pretty keen eyesight. So we use that as a test for good eyesight even today. Can you still see the 2 stars, Mizar and Alcor, right there in the second, right in the middle star, the handle of the Dipper? that second star in. The horse and rider is what it means in Arabic. One star looks like it's riding on top of the other. So visually, you'll be able to see them, binoculars, you'll get a really nice look. You'll see a third star that makes a little triangle with them. They are about 12 arc minutes apart, which makes them pretty easy for you to spot with your eye if the moon's not out and if it's up high enough and no real high clouds in the sky, you should be able to pull that off. But it's always good to check your eyesight on Mizar Alcor. So that's something you want to do. And by the way, if you have the telescope, take a look at Mizar Alcor, because Mizar truly is a double star, and you'll be able to split that pretty easily. So that's really kind of neat as well. Ferrero 6, or the Eiffel Tower. This is an asterism that looks like a tower, or maybe a rocket or something, but it's really easy to find. It's right by the star Alioth in the Big Dipper, and very, very simple to locate. Just a sketch I did looking through binoculars at this. And also the mini coat hanger. The coat hanger asterism is just below Cygnus. We have a mini coat hanger, which means it's a little smaller, might be a little better for telescope than binoculars and be small in there, but you can still make it out and see it. Just something fun to see in the sky. We got some Messier objects in Ursa Major, quite a few, mostly galaxies and a planetary nebula. And we're looking at telescopes for these. We're going to start off with M81 and M82 because they're right next to each other and classic. All these galaxies are absolutely stunning. They're really beautiful. M81 and M82, they're about 12 million light years away, and they are connected. They are connected with each other. M82 actually is being misshapen by tidal forces from M81, and they are both very, very active galaxies with a lot of huge star formation. If you want to catch them in the same image, two for a view, right? You're going to need a wide field for that. You're looking at about a full moon apart. It's going to be about a ½ degree between them, but you can catch them pretty easily with today's scopes with that. And yes, that's the way our moon looks. Tycho is on the bottom from where we see it visually here. The pinwheel or the whirlpool, both taken with the same telescope. Pinwheel is obviously a little larger, both beautiful face-on spiral galaxies. The whirlpool adds another little galaxy to it here as it's interacting. But we get to see a lot of beautiful structure coming off in the arms of both of these, and they are incredibly photogenic. M51, the whirlpool, actually is the very first deep space object to get the designation of galaxy after Hubble figured all that out. That was the very first one they officially called a spiral galaxy. So that's pretty impressive just there. Both beautiful. And the Owl Nebula, planetary. Again, very close to one of the stars of the Big Dipper, very easy to locate. They call it the owl because these two dark patches kind of look like the eyes of an owl. There's a star in the middle. It's becoming a white dwarf, blowing off that shell of gas. Once we get by, well, the deep north, looking at Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, we want to look at the Milky Way. And of course, as a northerner, when you go to the Southern Hemisphere, I want to look all over the sky. I want to see it all. But yeah, I'm going to spend all my time really looking at Carina to Crux to Scorpius. That whole area is just amazing, absolutely stunning. And if you're coming to the north, you really, really want to spend time with Cygnus the Swan and Cassiopeia. and Perseus. They are some really beautiful, amazing areas up in the northern Milky Way. And let's explore some of those. And we'll start with Perseus. Just 3 items here. The California Nebula, you can see, and I'm thinking it's probably no more than about 10 degrees for you guys once it hits the meridian. It's going to be fairly low and kind of in the soup, but it is a gorgeous nebula. And Algol, I believe you can catch. That's still going to be even a little bit lower, but you know, it's fairly bright as far as variable stars go, but it's an important one. But my favorite is the double cluster, and probably my favorite deep sky object, definitely cluster-wise, and just really, really beautiful to see. So let's start with Algol. That's something you would look at visually with the eye first, double cluster with binoculars, California Nebula with a telescope. Algol, the demon, because it was really freaky and got bright and dim so fast that people were wondering what in the world was going on with this thing. 2 days, 20 hours, 49 minutes, like clockwork, and bright. We're talking 2.1 to 3.4. I mean, you can notice it. Wasn't that brighter last night? Hang on a second. You know, just kind of looking at this thing. And of course, it's an eclipsing binary. You got one star moving around the other, and it does this dance as it keeps moving back and forth. Really, really neat to see. You need to have some of the other stars around it to use as your comparison stars if you're going to try to do that kind of work. It's a little bright to be doing CCD stuff on for variable stuff, so it's more of an eyeball kind of thing. But it really is very neat to see, and of course the classic. Love the double cluster. Nothing like 2 brilliant, gorgeous clusters next to each other and nestled in the Milky Way. It doesn't get better. This is really, really beautiful, phenomenal. They're about 7,600 light years from us, and they're separated by themselves by maybe just a few hundred light years. But this is really a beautiful thing to see. You're going to need a wide field telescope to capture this. Binoculars are phenomenal for this. And the California Nebula, huge, about 2.5 degrees long. This is really quite spectacular, fairly easy to photograph. And the entire nebula is due to that one star right there, Xi Persei. It is a really hot, active star giving off a lot of ultraviolet radiation. Some of the radiation is going to strike some of the hydrogen gas and get it all excited, turn it red, and creates the beautiful nebula that you see all along there. It really is quite phenomenal. But again, you are going to need a wide field view for this. It's big, 2.5 degrees. My home observatory and the constellation of Cassiopeia. So Cassiopeia, visually, you want to see that W. This is a classic constellation. But it's also nestled in the Milky Way, and it has a lot of stuff, a lot of great star clusters. It has some asterisms. We want to look at the dragonfly. And it also has a lot of nebulas to get those telescopes out there and do some deep sky work. So the double cluster is here in Perseus. And then we go up a little bit further and we start to hit some of the beautiful stuff here. Let's take a look at M103. One of the smallest, most remote clusters known, about 170 members or so, but it has a lot of B-type stars to it, which is really kind of interesting. Another very favorite cluster of mine is the Owl cluster, or called the ET cluster, MGC 457. We have two bright stars here that mark the eyes, the body, the legs, and then arms coming out on either side. They call it the Owl cluster. Whoop, that's ET. Hang on, there's my owl. That's the Owl cluster right there. So it kind of looks like an owl originally, but when ET came along, it thought looked more like ET. But it's a favorite at star parties. It definitely is very, very neat to see. An M52. It's about 22 light years across, about 6,000 stars, really rich, really beautiful. And it's in a nice part of the sky that you're going to be able to see a lot of great nebula. And you're going to be able to see other things like, well, the dragonfly and some asterisms. This is a really great area just to scan with binoculars, this whole section of sky. M52 is probably the nicest star cluster there. Although I do like the looks of the ET cluster. And there's a sketch of the dragonfly. And again, very easy asterism to find in the sky right next to M52. On the other side of M52 is the Bubble Nebula. And then we have the Pac-Man Nebula and the Heart and Soul. Just some of the major ones that you find in Cassiopeia. Let's look at the bubble first. Here's M52. And the bubble is right here, that tiny little thing right there. As you can see, there's a lot of nebulosity in this part of the sky, which is really kind of neat to see. Let's zoom in on this and get a little better view. It's a picture taken by my friend Dave. And he does some really fine work. We live about 10 minutes from each other and share telescopes and cameras and all sorts of stuff. But the bubble itself is just really, really pretty. The view you saw before is if you've got a small telescope. If you have a larger one, here's what you can do with the bubble. That's the kind of thing you're going to have. What are we looking at here? What's actually happening is inside of that bubble is a Wolf-Rayet star. They're energetic stars. And you're looking at the stellar wind that's pushing out from this star and building this bubble of gas with all the other hydrogen clouds that are around it. So it's a solar wind that's coming out of that. It's stellar wind, I guess you would call it. And the bubble itself, if you think about it, it's about 7 light years across. 7 light years. So you can imagine how energetic this star is. I mean, Alpha Centauri is only like 4.5 light years, 4.2 from the sun. This is 7 light years going across. Wolf-Rayet stars are pretty amazing and very energetic, the most energetic we've got. So that really is a beautiful, beautiful sight to see. A lot of fun to image. Here's another picture of Dave's. I've got my own Pac-Man, but I like his. He spends a lot of time in the Pac-Man. He loves this one. It's got a lot of those nice Bach dark globules in it. And can you see the Pac-Man shape to that? This is a beautiful star-forming region again, place where stars are being formed. And of course, we got the globules and things coming out from that. But it's got this opening here, which makes it look kind of like Pac-Man. So that's your Pac-Man Nebula. And the Heart and Soul. These are really beautiful and kind of difficult to catch them in the same frame. Again, you're looking at star-forming regions. You can, well, this is taken with the 51. This would be with the Red Cat 51, Williams Optic 51. and the ZWO camera. You are looking at the distance between them, about 5 full moons. You're looking about 2.5 degrees. Or if you think about it, that's about the length of the California Nebula. So you really need to have a very wide field in order to capture both of these in. Cassiopeia is married to Cepheus, the king. Looks kind of like a doghouse. Got a triangle and a square there. And just 2 objects I'm interested in for this. The Elephant Head Nebula, which is something you definitely want to look at, one of my all-time favorite nebulas, and Delta Cephei, which of course, again, if you're into variable star work, is a classic. Henrietta Leavitt being the first to work out some of the light curves from that. Delta Cephei, of course, is a classic Cepheid variable star. And again, fairly bright at 3.6 to 4.3 magnitude. And from this, of course, we can make distance calculations out to galaxies and everything else. We get that distance modulus. We can take a look at the relationship between the period of the Cepheid variable star to its distance. And now we've got a standard that we can use everywhere, which really is phenomenal. So it'd be kind of fun to mark that and to watch that, see where all of that began. And that is the elephant head. Huge. It's just gigantic. Barely fits the field of view. The elephant trunk, actually elephant trunk, not elephant head. Here's the trunk right here, coming down. And of course, we got a nice dark Bach globules in here, huge star forming region, and the Garnet Star. Doesn't look very red here just because of the exposure. It is a beautiful orange red in color and really accentuates the whole area. It's just phenomenal. There's the Garnet Star for just looking at that and not really focusing to get them deep nebula parts in. And it's still a little redder than that. It's kind of orange there, maybe a little more red orange. It's kind of reddish orange in color. These carbon-rich stars are just phenomenal. And the Garnet Star is actually one of the largest known stars. Radius, well, we're not really sure. Some say 1,200, some say up to 1,600 times that of the sun. Definitely one of the largest stars you can see with the unaided eye. And it's about 2,800 light years from here. But really, really beautiful to see. Nothing like looking at a sea of white stars and all of a sudden coming across something deeply red. That's just really beautiful. You don't want to miss that one. Okay, our last constellation is a biggie, and that's Cygnus. And we're really nestled up into the Milky Way. Here we've got lots of nebulas, we've got some star clusters, some stars, some great stuff to see. Alberio, of course, is the most beautiful double star in the sky. You can catch that from where you're at, but it's going to be low. And the Cedar area right here in the center is one of my favorites. There's just so much going on in there. And of course, up around Deneb as well. So let's take a look at Alberio and also Voltus Aerosori. This is our asterism. And this is a really good one. This is perfect for star parties up here. You definitely want to find that one. It's not too difficult to locate. Let's start there. This one looks like a smiley face. And it's really kind of neat to see this because you just have 2 bright stars for the eyes, and then you're going to have a bunch of stars coming down for the mouth on this thing. It really is a fun asterism and very, very easy to find. Makes you happy to be doing this stuff. Of course, Alberio, you're looking at the beautiful contrast between the 2 stars, but also All the other stars that it's nestled in that Milky Way just really set this thing apart, making it the best of the double stars. Binoculars, you're going to have a decently powerful pair of binoculars to pull this off, I would say. Small telescope would be better, but it can be done. M39. M39 is an interesting one. It's about 200 to 300 million years old. Not very old by standards as far as star clusters go. They're not really dying out at this point. Relatively loose cluster, though, with lots of bright stars. The better one would be M29. That one's really kind of neat. Has about 50 members to it. And a lot of those stars, you can see a lot of the blue in there, a lot of B-type stars. That's what you're looking at here, which really makes that and sets it apart from the others. But that one really sets out nicely against the background stars. Nebulas, we have the Veil, the Crescent, the North American, the Pelican, the Cocoon. We've got lots. We're up here at M39. Let's go right next door to the Cocoon. Actually, we'll start at the Cedar region. We'll do that first. Okay, so Cedar's in the middle. And I love imaging this part of the sky because there's lots and lots and lots of nebulosity. And part of that, of course, is you're going to find M29. The cluster is going to be nearby. And also the Crescent Nebula is going to be close. And here's the Crescent Nebula. This was taken, again, with the 51 Red Cat. And look at all the stars. It's just crazy. The Crescent being right here. So we can see that. Let's take a look at a close-up. This is one of Dave's pictures. And as you can see, it's now looking more like a human brain or something of that nature. It goes all the way around. Yeah, it's a little thicker on this end where you see the crescent. But again, like the bubble, you're looking at something from the stellar wind from a Wolf-Rayet star. And that's really what's happening here. Again, just pushing, expanding all that stuff out into those other gases out there. This one's about 15 light years across, coming through there. These are really active stars. The Veil. The Veil is beautiful. You're going to need a really wide field if you want to capture the entire Veil in. That's going to be a little tough. You're looking at a supernova explosion, star that exploded 8,000, 9,000, maybe 10,000 years ago. We're not really certain about that. Depends how well you're looking at how these things expanded and trying to pull them back together again. But we've got an eastern half and a western half. You got a beautiful star right here, which really sets that off. You've got things in the middle. You're looking at all the elements of the periodic table that are mixed in with this as they're just expanding out. We're getting ready to mix in with other nebulas to get some nice star-forming regions and put them in some nice chemicals where life can start to form and develop. The Veil is beautiful. This whole thing measures about 110 light years across at this point, roughly. The Cocoon. Called the Cocoon, you've got a nice, well, you've got a reflection nebula in there, and you've got an emission nebula in there. Young star cluster happening in there, some star formation, but it's called the Cocoon because of the black area, the dark nebula here that comes up and around. So this whole thing comes around and then kind of surrounds it like a cocoon. So we're really looking at the dark area there, which is really kind of interesting. and one of our favorites to image always, the North American and the Pelican Nebula. These are just exciting for us. Very close to Deneb, very close to Deneb, really beautiful to see, about 1,600 light years away. Very, very large, incredibly faint. Visually, I could catch it, but I needed a 25-inch telescope in really dark skies in order to see it faintly with my not so teenage eyes anymore. But through a telescope, this is a piece of cake. 5-minute exposure. Dave's 3 minutes. I'm like, I like 8 to 10, but we go back and forth on all of that. This is really a phenomenal area and one you definitely should take a look at, have some fun with. That's the highlights. So what it comes down to now is when you're going to plan to go and what you're going to plan to do and how you're going to set things up. You want to see constellations. That's definite. There are some things you definitely want to check out, such as Polaris and Mizar-Alcor, some of those interesting objects. When I went to the Southern Hemisphere, binoculars were my choice, and I went to the Astronomical League, let them do the work for me. I did the Deep Sky Southern Binocular Observing Program, and they gave me 100 items or so that are the best that you can see with binoculars. Now I just had to get out my star chart and just start highlighting all the areas where they were so I could find them fast when I was out in the field and make up the papers for it so I could get out there and do the stuff that I really wanted to do. We have a northern deep sky binocular observing program, and you can catch that on the Astronomical League's website. And they're going to give you the best of the best objects to see with binoculars. I've gone through this as well, and it's a lot of fun, and it's easy and pretty fast to do, and it really gives you a good overview of the entire sky and what's happening. Binoculars are a really great way to start if you're limited for time. Now, if you have a telescope, that's totally different. If you can take a small scope and enjoy that, you're in pretty good shape. If COVID is telling you you can't leave for a while, and it's kind of telling all of us that still at this point, there are other ways to get excited about this. And you can use online telescopes. Skynet has telescopes, and I use a lot of their stuff with the Mars Society, with my classes, with the ones in New Mexico, ones in Utah. But they have telescopes all over the world, Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, that you can log on to, that you can use, even radio telescopes. And there's prices to pay, and you have to go through some of those things with it. But I will tell you that the 20-foot dish for the radio telescope at Green Bank is phenomenal. And I've recorded pulsars with that. And that's actually fairly easy to do. It was actually designed to do that. So there's a lot that you can work with these. And of course, Skynet's not the only one. There are many others. SLO also is a very big one, an important one that a lot of people like and a lot of people use as well. So a lot of ways to learn to explore space, as they say, and a lot of opportunities to take advantage and start to image some of these things at home right from your own computer. The important thing is to have fun and to keep looking up. I thought I'd end with Orion the Hunter. You see him in here, right? You're familiar with Orion, except he's rising with his shield up first as he's facing and pushing the bull back across the sky. I'm always amazed. I go to the Southern Hemisphere and it's like, Orion is rising toes first. Wow, how is that possible? A little more majestic here in the north with that, but it's definitely different. It's definitely different. Any questions?
So what size telescope do you have at home?
I'm sorry?
What size telescope do you have at home?
Your internet connection is unstable. What kind of telescope do I? Okay. Depends what project. In my own observatory, I've got an 11-inch Celestron. If I'm using remote, I've got a 14-inch Celestron. I've got a 16-inch RC, 70 millimeter little stellar view for wide field. I also use a 25 Dob when I'm visiting out in Montana. I spend a week out there every year. I get a chance to play with that. And I've got lots of little scopes and different telescopes. I got a 14-inch telescope right now at home, but that's only used for Jupiter and Saturn, which I have to take down now because the Jupiter-Saturn season's pretty much over. And solar telescopes, I've got those. And importantly, I've got friends who have telescopes that keep dropping them off here. And it's kind of like the telescope du jour. I got a 91 millimeter Williams optics the other day, brand new, gorgeous. And my friend bought it and he said, here it is, didn't even open the box, and says, here's the EAF I want you to put on it. Here's the field flattener I want you to put on it. Side scope I want you to put on it. Put it all together, have some fun with it, bring it back to me, everything focused. So I can just pop it on. I said, not a problem, I'm your man. I can do it. So I get that kind of stuff all the time and just really enjoying that. So it's a great way to work it.
So if anyone's got questions, you can unmute yourself. Hopefully Peter could hear us. Otherwise, just pop it into the chat. So if you just move your mouse around a little bit, you'll find the little thing pops up at the bottom and you'll see chat.
I see the bubble nebula in the chat. Yeah, the bubble nebula is really pretty. That's just so unusual. Just so unusual. Gorgeous.
I think, you know, like I said, for me, the very first time, you know, going across, I had absolutely nothing, no binoculars, no telescope, or you know, anything available. So it was purely observing using your eyes, and it was just amazing. You know, like you say, the things like the Big Dipper. You know, even though I'd never seen it, you know, in person, I could look up into the night sky and go, "There's the Big Dipper." You know.
Yeah, and
of course, seeing the moon
yeah,
the wrong way around.
You want to see those constellations, you know, and it's a lot of fun when you're. Okay, there's Musca the fly, and I mean some of the chameleon. I mean, some of your guys are pretty faint down there. Our Camelopardalis is the same way. I mean, it's everywhere, but definitely. Was the bubble nebula image taken through a particular filter? I would say all the nebula filters, or all the nebula pictures, were taken with the L Extreme filter and L Enhance. We typically go to the L Extreme. Typically, Dave and I use that. The L Enhance might have been with the North American because it looked a little more pink than red on that one. So that was probably the L Enhance. And we use the L Pro when we're dealing with color galaxy images and that sort of thing.
So I believe you're quite interested in eclipsing binaries. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about eclipsing binaries.
Oh, well, I did a lot of work on eclipsing binaries in college because that's what my professor was into. And in those days, we had an 18-inch telescope up at the observatory in town. It was hooked up a huge photoelectric photometer on the back end that was hooked up to a strip chart recorder. And there was no computers at all. We didn't have them at that point. I seem old all of a sudden. But anyway, you would have this thing and then you would make a tick mark and you'd write the time on the chart, and then you would do little calibrations, and then you would start the thing up with the filters and just mark the times every now and again. And my job was to do all that, and then at the end to rip off the strip chart recording and roll it across a long lab table, and then with a ruler, figure out the timings for all of them, put them in a notebook along with the magnitudes going up that he could take them and then put stuff together. So, but it was kind of fun. A lot more labor intensive than what you do today as far as doing stuff with CCD stuff, that's for sure. But it was a great experience and just joyful. I mean, that was my job. I had the keys to the observatory, and every night I would go out and open them up, and had my first paper published when I was a sophomore, which was really nice. So yeah, the eclipsing binaries are interesting. I don't do a whole lot with them these days. I do a lot of work with the AAVSO and sending stuff in, but it seems most of my stuff is the more mundane Myra type, because that's what I'm teaching my students because they're the easiest. So I'm usually throwing some of those in. But I did do a program on dwarf novae, which was kind of fun just this year, actually, just this past spring. I did 3 months of really intensive dwarf novae, a couple hundred observations of those, and trying to work some of that stuff out. And actually got to see some novas and really kind of work those through, and just, that's really cool. That's really neat. And it's always fun when you get an AAVSO alert and everybody wants you to look at this one star and really look at it. And they said, and the last person to have an observation was Peter Detterline, and he saw it at this magnitude. I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And we need everybody to start looking at it, starting to do something fun. So like, cool.
Have you managed to see Comet Leonard yet?
I just imaged it the other day in New Mexico and didn't like it. Needs to be centered. I actually need a bigger scope. I got to go to the telescope at Mars, the really small one, because I want a wider field. I mean, I got a really close up of the front of it. I have not been able to put anything together here at home. I've had cloudy weather all week. And it just, I've got everything set and ready to go for it, but I just need some good weather to pull it off. And I don't have that yet, and I'm not sure when that's going to be. So it's going to be a few more days yet of this slop outside. So it looks like we'll be doing it remotely from Utah. But have you guys imaged anything with that yet? Can you get it down there?
We've had one or two. But it's not really in a good position at the moment. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, like most of the comets, you guys get the first shot and we get the remnants around the sun. So
no. Every time there's a great comet, it's always in the south. It's like, when you come to north, come on. All the really bright, beautiful ones are down there. But yeah, we get some interesting ones. But
it's interesting with Leonard because the most recent images kind of suggest that it's already breaking up. So as it does its little thing around the sun, I'm not quite sure whether we're going to actually get to see much of it once it comes into good view here, which is annoying.
Well, comets, are like cats. You never know what they're going to do, right?
Well, that's it. They're always saying this is the comet of the century, and then it ends up not being.
I am so tired of losing bets with my astronomer friends that this comet's going to be so bright we're going to be able to see it, and then I lose every time. Lose that bet every time.
So, personally, what are you interested in at the moment?
Okay, so what projects do I have running right now? I'm working on some planetary nebulas. I am finished up with the Caldwell Club for the first time. I got to do a few ones, but they're all Southern Hemisphere. I'm sketching, so that one may be a few years. At this point, I need like 3, or something like that. But I've got to go further south, so I'm not sure when that'll happen. But there's no rush. I'm doing some radio astronomy right now. I decided it's been way too long since I've done radio astronomy, so now I've got a dish out there to look for 21 centimeter radiation in the Milky Way. And I tried it out the other night. Everything's working properly. I'm just not happy with it. I'm going to rip off the tripod, put a Losmandy base on it and hook it onto the CGX mount and just steer it. I think would be the best way to go with that and just have some fun. So my projects change constantly. And the comet, of course, is now huge on my list. So, and I'm still doing variable stars. There's things in the background that still have to get done, as far as contributions, but those are my main projects right now.
That's one of the interesting things here with the radio astronomy. It's one of my interests, and I'm busy building up one of the software-defined radio, also to look at 21 centimeter hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
And it amazes me. You go back sort of 15, 20 years. To do radio astronomy was near impossible. You could have a small little setup for 21 centimeter, but doing it properly was just about impossible. And these days, things are just so affordable and so easy. It just amazes me how far we've come.
Well, you get groups like Sarah, they have their scope in a box, and you just buy that, and all of a sudden you have an antenna in your house and all the hookups and software. It's like, okay, I just have to learn to follow weird instructions, put everything together, and see if I can get it to work. And somehow it does. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is really amazing. You mentioned the remote telescopes. We were lucky enough to have Heratina speaking to us quite early on in the first lockdown, and she spoke to us about SLU and the things that she's doing on SLU, which is really amazing. But you mentioned Skynet. How does Skynet differ from SLU, or is it essentially the same thing?
I haven't used SLU as far as that goes, but I think it's essentially the same in that you're getting time on the telescope. Now, okay, I'm not sure about SLU, but let me tell you what Skynet does. I have a student, if you've got an account, you log in and you go to observing and you put in, I would like to go to Comet Leonard, A1 Leonard. And then it says, okay. And then you pick your telescope, you pick your filter or filters, you pick your exposure times, and you submit. And it will put it in a queue. And when it's at a good time to image it, it will image it, and you can pick it out of your box the next day. You can download it and then just process it. So you don't have to stay up all night to do anything. You can do all your stuff in the daytime, and I want all these objects. You do about 10, 15, 20 different things and just leave them in there, and then it will decide when the best time to image each of those, and it will take care of that night. So that's basically how it works.
Kind of similar to the SLU as well. Then, of course, the more you pay, the more time you can get, and more personalized it becomes.
The Skynet is all done off of credits. So you get so many credits, and I think a credit is 1 second. So, but you like, oh, I'm going to go buy 10,000 credits, that kind of thing, or whatever. But for students, it's free. So it works out really well for them as far as projects, and we can do lots of really cool stuff with that. So it's a really good educational tool for them.
And you mentioned the Astronomical League. What is the Astronomical League, and what kind of things do they do?
The Astronomical League, we have astronomy clubs, right? You've got yours. I'm with the Lehigh Valley Astronomical Club here, and we've got the Berks Club. We got all sorts of different astronomy clubs. The Astronomical League in the United States takes those clubs and puts them all under one umbrella. So those clubs can join the Astronomical League. And then when they do that, then they get certain benefits from all of this. I think one of the best benefits they have are definitely their observing clubs. Now, you don't have to be, or don't have to have your club to be a member in the Astronomical League to benefit from those. If you go to Astronomical League on Google and you check them out, check out their website, you can go right to observing clubs and you can look up anything you want there and just follow along with all the parameters they have and do whatever you want to do. If you want to be a member, you can be a member at large and just pay as a single person. That's pretty much what I do because my astronomy club isn't a member anymore. If I was in my astronomy club, then I would automatically be a member. But that's not the case. So I'm a member at large. And when you're done, you get a certificate, you get a pin, that kind of thing to show, you've completed these things. And some of them are really good. It's a nice survey of the sky, I like to call it. Others are more advanced. You're looking at actual research and doing things. But each one, I like to look at it and think, what can I bring to it? What can I do to it? How can I make it a little more me? If I am doing the Mars thing, then I want to be submitting it to ELPO. Let me really learn how to take great images of Mars for the Mars Club. And I mean, really good stuff that I can really hone my skills in this, that I can send it and actually get some good use out of this to somebody. And I've been able to pull that off with a lot of help from ELPO saying, no, try this camera. That's going to be a much better camera than this, or try this, and you want to mix that. And then eventually it's like, oh my gosh, this now works. So yeah, you learn as you go. It's kind of fun, but it's a great way to really learn the sky and all sorts of different things, like globular clusters, right? So I'm going to do 50 globular clusters and image them. Okay, that's cool. And I'm doing that, but one of their challenge things was looking at globular clusters in the Andromeda galaxy.
Wow.
Seriously, you can do that? Like, really? Like, wait a second. And then it shows you how, and it's like, I'm taking pictures of Andromeda. I want to see some globulars. And I'm looking on this thing and I'm identifying globulars now in the arms. It's cool stuff like that, and that you might not think of. So they've got they put a lot of thought into this.
Talking of Andromeda, we right at the moment able to see it just peeking up over our northern horizon. You've got to be on a very high spot with a very good view of the north, and then we could just see it popping up. So we've had quite a lot of our local guys trying to image it. Of course, it's quite a difficult thing being so low at the horizon. I'm just wondering if
think of that. You're right. And Andromeda would be that'd be a phenomenal one. I should have had that in there.
Yeah. So yeah, it's one that we're lucky enough that we can actually get to see for about a month or so, I think, and then it's on its way down at the moment, so not much longer. But it'd be interesting to see a globular cluster in Andromeda. That I think it's quite mind blowing. I love my globular clusters. My favorites.
Well, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert here, James, but it's going to look like a star.
I'm pretty sure of that. Yeah.
They're not going to break up into individual stars there in Andromeda, but like, that's actually a globular. I'm thinking, how in the world do you figure that out? It's not a star, that's actually a globular. Really? They got like 20 of them that they've identified. So spectral cloud, they do it by spectrum.
Yeah.
They do it by the spectrum.
That's amazing. It's really amazing what they can do these days. By the way, if anyone else has got questions, please pop them in the chat or unmute yourself. So I think it's getting quite late for you there, Pina, so we'll let you crawl into bed while you've got a chance to with the overcast. Anyone else?
It's been fun. I thank you for the opportunity, and it's great to see everybody and get a chance to present.
Well,
I hope you get a chance to stop in the Northern Hemisphere, at least do some observing remotely or something.
Definitely, if we're in the Northern Hemisphere, we'll probably look you up, come and visit your observatory. But yeah, thank you very, very much.
Thank you,
for doing
Peter. That
this.
was fascinating. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That was very good. Yes, excellent.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
And Nathaniel says, thanks for the talk. Haratina, wonderful to listen to you, Peter. Yeah, quite a few. Jerry says thanks as well. Yeah, so yeah, again, thanks so much. Yeah, hopefully we can twist your arm to come and do this again sometime.
It wouldn't take a whole lot of twisting. You know, not a problem.
And of course,
happy to do so.
If you're ever in the Auckland area, you know, you're welcome to give us a shout or give Haratina a shout, and she'll put you in contact with us. And you know, we'd love to see you in person one day.
That would be great. That would be great.
So I think, Chris, you can stop recording.
Stop recording.
Thank you, everyone, for coming along.